Hey YouTubers, and welcome back to my YouTube channel Master That English, where we understand, analyze and interpret the important texts and concepts that may be part of your English curriculum. Our topic for today will be the analysis of the short story written by the writer Indira Goswami, which is The Empty Chest. So get your pens and notepads ready because here we go. Imagine a woman who lives beside a cremation ground. Every morning she wakes up to the smell of burnt flesh. But that isn't the strangest part of her life. The strangest part is this: she sleeps inside a wooden chest that once carried a dead body. Why? Is she mad? Is she haunted? Or is Indira Goswami trying to tell us something much deeper? In order to explore and understand this short story, let us first try to understand who is Indira Goswami. Indira Mamoni Raisom Goswami, also known by her pen name Mamoni Raisom Goswami and popularly as Mamoni Baidyo, was an Indian writer, poet, professor, scholar and editor. She wrote about women, widows, poverty, social injustice and human suffering. Her works combine realism with deep emotional insight. In Indira Goswami's literary career, which is very distinguished by her unwavering commitment to portraying the lives of society's marginalized and sentenced communities, we can explore many interesting themes in most of her major works. For instance, in the work The Blue-Necked God, she exposes the exploitation, poverty, and emotional suffering of Hindu widows in Vrindavan, drawing from her own experiences among them. In The Moth-Eaten Howrah of the Tusker, she examines the oppressed lives of Brahmin widows in Orthodox Assamese society, revealing how patriarchy, caste, and religious customs deprive women of dignity and agency. In Pages Stained with Blood, Goswami documents the trauma of 1984 anti-Sikh riots in Delhi, giving voice to victims of communal violence and social injustice. Her controversial novel, The Man from Chinmasta, challenges the ritual of animal sacrifice at the Kamakhya temple while questioning the intersection of religion, violence, and power. Across these works, Goswami consistently transforms literature into a medium of social witness, foregrounding the experiences of widows, the poor, and the right victims, women and other marginalized groups whose lives are often erased from mainstream narratives. Let us take a look at her achievements. She was the winner of the Sahitya Academy Award in the year 1983. After receiving the Gyanpath Award in 2000, the Government of India announced the Padma Shri for her in 2002. However, Goswami politely declined it, explaining that many of her readers felt that after the Gyanpath, the Padma Shri was not an appropriate recognition. She stated that she humbly refused it in all humility, and that she had conveyed her gratitude to the government while declining the honor. She also received the Principal Prince Claus Laureate Award in 2008. One of India's greatest Assamese writers, many of her works have been translated into English from her native Assamese, which include The Moth-Eaten Howrah of the Tusker, Pages Stained with Blood, and The Man of Chinnamasta. She was also well known for her attempts to structure social change, both through her writings and through her role as mediator between the armed militant group United Liberation Front, of Assam and the government of India. While the empty chest is fictionalized, it heavily mirrors the writer's actual experiences, her psychological battles with grief, and her familiarity with marginalized life. So let us try to understand what is the real life inspiration for the story. The story, which was originally titled Undang Bakach in Assamese, was inspired by a real event. Goswami witnessed a blood-stained wooden coffin discarded near a cremation ground. This striking image became the foundation for the story, where the protagonist retrieves a discarded chest that once carried the dead body of her upper caste lover. Let us explore the parallels of grief and despair the story has to her personal life. After the sudden death of her husband, Mamoni Raisom Iyengar, who was an engineer, her husband died in a car accident just 18 months after their marriage. Goswami suffered from severe depression and suicidal thoughts. This grief is reflected in Thoradoi's morbid action of sleeping inside the chest. Goswami is frequently using blood imagery in her writings to reflect her inner trauma. In the story, the blood-stained chest represents the violent end of love and the societal wounds inflicted on women. The story is set on the outskirts of a cremation ground near the Kamakhya temple. Goswami lived for a long time in Vrindavan and other religious hubs, where she closely observed the horrific and neglected conditions of destitute women and widows. At the end of the story, Thoradoi's burning of the chest is viewed by some critics as Goswami's own therapeutic attempt to burn away her agonizing past and free herself from the ghosts of her personal losses. Let us try to understand the story. The Empty Chest is a moving short story that explores love and sacrifice, social inequality, patriarchal traditions, emotional suffering, the struggle between personal desire and social expectations. The story presents the painful consequences of rigid social customs. Let us try to understand the various characters present in this short story. We have the female protagonist, who is Thoradoi, a poor maid working in a zamindar's house. She is kind, devoted, and emotionally strong. She loves Sarabopa, the landlord's son, sincerely. Now, let us try to understand who is Sarubopa. He is the son of the zamindar who also loves Thoradoi, but is unable to overcome family and social pressure to marry Thoradoi. We also had Thoradoi's brother, who is Someshwar, who works as a policeman. He is a harsh and unfeeling character. He is the one who shatters Thoradoi's romantic illusions. Then we have the zamindar's family that represents tradition, class hierarchy, and social prejudice. Let us try to get an overview of the story with this short summary. Thoradoi works as a maid. She falls in love with Sarubopa. Their love grows despite differences in social status. But now, the zamindar's family opposes their relationship. Their love remains unfulfilled, and Thoradoi is married to a driver by her family. Her husband is imprisoned for killing 2 people, and she single-handedly has to raise her children. One day she gets to find that the chest in which Sarabopa was brought to the cremation. She drags that box inside and finds solace in it. She is emotionally devastated when her brother shows her Sarubopa's wedding card. And in the end, she eventually burns the chest where her illusion is broken. When you look at the story at the surface level, we get to see the life of Toradoi, who appears to be a woman grieving the death of her beloved. But on the psychological realm, when we try to understand this idea of loss, we are reminded of the concepts proposed by the psychologist Sigmund Freud, who gives a beautiful distinction between mourning and melancholia that invites us to take a deeper question into this story. The question that we need to raise first before exploring this concept is Toradoi merely mourning a lost love, or has her grief become so deeply internalized that it reshapes her very identity? In order to understand this, let us understand the concept proposed in the seminal essay titled Mourning and Melancholia in the year 1917 by Sigmund Freud, where he distinguishes between two psychological responses to loss. First, we have mourning. Mourning is a natural and conscious process through which an individual gradually accepts the absence of the loved object. Although the process is emotionally painful, it eventually allows the bereaved person to detach from the lost object and reinvest emotional energy in life. Mourning, therefore, is finite and restorative because the person realizes that they have eventually lost the person who they had acknowledged and loved so much in their life. But in the concept of melancholia, by contrast, it is marked by an inability to relinquish the lost object. Rather than recognizing the loss as external, the individual unconsciously internalizes it, making the lost object part of self. Freud famously observes that while in mourning, it is the world that has become poor and empty, but in melancholia, it is the ego itself. Because in melancholia, the person is isolated and completely separated from the rest of the world. The result is grief that no longer remains a response to loss, but becomes a defining aspect of one's identity. This is why the empty chest carries an essence of symbolism in it. Let us try to understand the essence of this chest on the symbolic realm and how it acts as a source of melancholia for the character in the story. While the chest is physically empty, it is emotionally filled with memories, longing, and unresolved grief. It becomes a reflection of Toradoi's inner world, where the pain of loss continues to live long after her beloved's death. So, this is why the empty chest symbolizes many things. It is the emotional emptiness, the void created by the loss of Sarubopa. It is also symbolic of the broken dreams, a future that could never become reality. It is symbolic of unfulfilled love, a relationship denied by social and caste barriers. It is the loss of hope, the realization that her longing can never be fulfilled. It is loneliness created by social oppression, a society that values caste and tradition over human relationships. In this way, the empty chest is not simply an object in the story. It becomes a metaphor for Toradoi's psyche. It preserves her memories, her grief, and the life she was never allowed to live, making it the most powerful symbol of both her melancholia and the emotional cost of social oppression. This is the reason why we need to understand that the symbolism of the empty chest, however, is not the only element that reflects Toradoi's emotional condition. Indira Goswami carefully extends this sense of grief and isolation to the physical setting of the story. In literature, the environment often mirrors the emotional state of the characters, allowing the external world to become an extension of their inner reality. This relationship between place and psychology makes the setting far more than a mere backdrop. It becomes a silent participant in the narrative. To understand Thoradoi's loneliness and despair more fully, to examine where the story unfolds and why Goswami deliberately chooses such a setting. So, what is the backdrop of the story? The story takes place near the cremation ground, creating a dark and gloomy atmosphere. The setting is not used simply to create fear or horror. Instead, it is an important literary device that strengthens the main themes of the story. It highlights Thoradoi's isolation from society, the decline and suffering in her life, and the complete destruction of her romantic dreams and hopes. Now it is important to understand what is the significance of the cremation ground setting. In the rigid caste hierarchy of Assam, the cremation ground is a space reserved for the untouchable, the dead, and the societal outcast. Living next to a cremation ground forces the characters into an unnatural intimacy with death, which mirrors their economic desperation. By placing Thoradoi at the edge of the burning ghats, Goswami immediately establishes her status as a subhuman in the eyes of the upper caste society. Also, her romance with Sorabapu, a representative of the upper caste, can only find a home among the dead, highlighting that the union between their classes was never possible in civilized, polite society. We also see the burning ghats that mirrors Thoradoi's emotional wasteland. The smoke, ash, and the charred wood surrounding her shack reflect the barrenness of her own life. Eventually, it is the site of ultimate catharsis and rebirth for the climax of the story towards the end. So let us now try to understand, how does Thoradoi's living space reflect her social status? Thoradoi is living in a poor, leaking shack with holes in its walls and roof. The shack is located beside the cremation ground, beneath the shrine of Kamakhya in Assam, where funeral pyres are regularly lit. This place, associated with death, smoke, ashes, and social neglect, is part of a settlement inhabited by people living in extreme poverty. It is reflective of her isolation, hardship, and social status. In the morning scene, Thoradoi comes out of her shack as she usually does, but when she notices Haibor, she immediately turns back inside, as she is startled by Haibor's unexpected presence. Haibor is normally present around her house in the morning, but on this occasion, his appearance catches her attention in a way that makes her withdraw. Thoradoi avoids facing him because her relationship is one of silence and restraint rather than open conversation. As a woman living without her husband, she is careful not to be seen interacting freely with Haibor. Even a brief meeting could invite gossip or criticism. Now, who is this man, Haibor? And why does Haibor stand looking in her direction every day? Haibor is the firewood vendor from the crematory and one of those men who exploit women. He hoped that one day Thoradoi would relent and give in to his demands.
It has been a long time before that drunkard of yours comes out of jail. That is, if he comes out at all. After all, he has killed not one but two people by ramming into them.
Toradoi's husband was in jail for killing two people, and there was no news about his release from prison. So Haibor wanted to exploit the situation by promising to look after her and her two children.
But I am here, don't worry. Only keep the door open at night. This way, at least your two kids won't starve to death.
Since he was lured by the prospect of Toradoi's door being open for him, he came even before daybreak to see if she had relented. But why did Toradoi come out once again from her shack when she knows that Haibor is there? She came out to check that no one was around, as she suspected that people were keeping an eye on her wooden chest. So, how did Toradoi justify her action of taking the chest? Toradoi justifies her action as the inhabitants in that area were scavenging for survival. The inhabitants living near the cremation ground steal wood, shrouds, and gold ornaments from the dead bodies brought to the ghats. This shocking detail underscores how poverty strips away human dignity, forcing the living to feed off the diseased. For Toradoi, the chest was not a piece of furniture, but her only connect with her dead lover. So when she came inside the shack, why did Toradoi lie inside the chest? Toradoi lies inside the discarded burial chest that has become her primary piece of furniture, because the chest has become a powerful emotional and symbolic space for her. The chest belongs to Sorabapu, the landlord's son, whom Toradoi had loved before marriage. Due to societal pressure, they could not marry. He had died in an accident, and his corpse had been brought in that chest for cremation. So Toradoi had dragged that chest inside her shack. By lying inside it, she clings to the memories of the happier time when she had love and hope. Frequently, Toradoi dresses up and lies inside the empty chest to emotionally relive her past memories. She seeks emotional refuge from the chest. Lying inside the chest is like withdrawing from the harsh realities of her life. The chest resembles a closed space, a sanctuary from the restrictions of poverty and society. Her action reveals her psychological state. Instead of speaking about her pain, Goswami shows that it is through this unusual action. Toradoi's lying in the chest suggests emotional exhaustion, despair, and the desire to escape, even if for a moment. Thus, her daily routine is consumed by mourning and tending to the literal box of death. The setting validates her morbid fixation. She is a ghost haunting her own life, surrounded by a community of the dead. We should also try to understand, why does Goswami lay heavy emphasis on the description of the chest? She could have directly written this story by just giving us the details, but Goswami describes the chest in great detail, especially its blood stains. To Toradoi, these stains represent the painful end of a love that could never survive because of caste and class difference. The chest constantly reminds her of both her love and her loss. Toradoi even sleeps inside the chest with its lid open. This shows how closely her life, identity, and emotions are connected to it. It has become the only place where she feels close to Sarubopa and safe with her memories. The chest also reflects Toradoi's own life. Just as it was used to carry Sarubopa's body and then thrown away at the cremation ground, Toradoi was also used by him for his pleasure and later abandoned because society would not accept their relationship. The heavy chest lying inside her small, poor hut also symbolizes the emotional burden she carries every day. Through this image, Goswami shows how poor women are often left to suffer the pain, the consequences of the actions of powerful and wealthy men. And this is one of the most defining characteristics of Indira Goswami's writing, that is, her extraordinary use of sensory imagery. She doesn't simply narrate a story, she paints it. Her descriptions appeal simultaneously to sight, smell, sound, touch, and even temperature, making the reader inhabit the world she creates rather than merely observe it. So now, let us try to understand who disturbs her tranquility as she was lying in the chest. The movement of the passing police vehicles disturbed her tranquility. What was the reason for the constant movement of police cars in this specific area? The police are drawn to the fringes of the cremation ground, where Toradoi lives due to several specific reasons. It is a flourishing prostitution trade area. So the area near Sadgaon cremation ground is a hub for sex work. Goswami notes that the trade of the local prostitute flourishes there, creating a chaotic environment where the heat generated by the illegal trade seems to compete with the flames devouring the dead. There are frequent altercations and riots in this area. So the tense atmosphere of the crematorium frequently sparks clashes. The police are regularly called to handle heated altercations and disputes that break out between the local authorities, visitors, and members of the crematorium committee. There are criminal elements and inmates over here, so the area is generally criminalized and heavily monitored due to poverty and illegal activities. In fact, Toradoi's own husband has previously been arrested and taken to jail, establishing a pattern of police intervention in the neighborhood. Ultimately, the author establishes the heavy police presence in the unsafe environment Toradoi lives in, to contrast the chaos outside with her own quiet internal grief. So let us now try to understand what was the illusion that Toradoi had regarding Sarabupu. Toradoi believed that Sarabupu had remained loyal to her forbidden love by remaining unmarried for the last 12 years.
Only because he couldn't marry me did he remain a bachelor. 12 whole years have gone by probably. He would not have married at all.
So what was the reality check that her brother gives her? Someshwar, who is from the police force, comes and meets Toradoi.
Toradoi, the days of the sahibs marrying the daughters of laborers are gone.
Her brother Someshwar arrives and shatters her romanticized grief. He reveals that despite her deep sacrifices for his family, Sarubopa had long abandoned his intentions towards her and was actively arranging a marriage with a woman of his own social standing. He was on his way to the marriage when the accident took place that took his life. So what was the impact of Someshwar's information to Toradoi? This harsh truth completely shifts the symbolic meaning of the chest for Toradoi. This is where her process of mourning actually starts. because she is stunned by the realization of Sarabapu's betrayal. Her profound grief transforms into clarity, recognizing that her devotion was entirely unreciprocated. Her romantic illusions are shattered. She does not throw the chest away. She drags it out to the cremation ground with the help of her children and burns it. Once the romantic illusion shatters, the chest is stripped of its ghostly warmth. It is no longer a vessel holding precious memories. It is just a hollow, worthless piece of wood. In this way, by consigning the chest to the fire of the burning ghats, she performs a ritualistic cremation of her past, her memories of her lover, her exploitation, and her false hopes. She was finally freeing her mind from its emotional imprisonment by turning the chest into the funeral pyre. Thus, she frees herself from her emotional dependence on past and accepts the painful reality of her life. In fact, this is the true process of mourning, where you accept the reality in its truest form and stops rummaging through the memories that agonize and make life more painful for yourself. So this is why it is important to understand that by the end of the story, we see a transformation in this character. And with her transformed character, what we notice is a very interesting change by the end of the story, which is the enemy, Hybor, who was after her, is absent under the tree where she had burned the chest. Why is this man not present there? We notice that throughout the story, like a predator waiting to exploit, Hybor maintains a vigil under the tree. He relentlessly pressures her to keep the door open at night in exchange for financial survival. However, on the specific morning when she drags the chest out to burn it, he is not in sight. This shows that at this point, Toradoi emerges from her shack during the burning without her chadar and shawl. In her society, dropping the shawl symbolizes a total loss of conventional modesty, respectability, and social standing. By letting the chest burn while standing exposed, she consciously sheds her past identity as the loyal, grieving lover. She has discarded her vulnerability and embodies resilience as she is finally ready to challenge the world and men like Hybor. Throughout the story, Hybor represents male exploitation, lust, and the social vulnerability of poor women. His disappearance at the end signifies that once Toradoi destroys her attachment to the past, she also breaks free, at least symbolically, from the man who sought to possess or exploit her. The ending therefore shifts from despair to quiet resilience and self-dignity, making Hybor's absence an important symbol of Toradoi's inner liberation. Hybor's absence suggests that his expectations have failed and that he realizes that she is no longer the vulnerable lady he had seen. It symbolizes Toradoi's newfound strength. The final line that we get to see in the story is, "The man who always stood under the hijol tree was not there." This line marks a new beginning for Toradoi. She no longer is oppressive now. So the disappearance of both the chest and Hybor shows that where the chest was the emotional prison, Hybor was the symbol of exploitation, and now she is ready to face life on her own terms, without any emotional baggage. And this is where the tree in the end is also an important symbol. It is a symbol of endurance and judgment. The Hijol tree stands outside Thoradoi's dilapidated shack and acts as an anchor for the story's primary themes. Thoradoi's unbending nature. The Hijol is naturally a resilient tree, built to withstand harsh weather, seasonal ravages, and flooding. Positioned directly outside her home, it symbolizes Thoradoi's inner strength and capacity to endure severe emotional and physical hardships while raising her children in absolute poverty. The tree is also a silent witness, as it stands as a motionless observer to the trials of her life. Her grief, her desperate conversation, and the constant hovering of predatory men like Haibor. It is also the seat of patriarchal exploitation, because Haibor uses the tree as a regular stakeout spot to pressure Thoradoi. It is a constant reminder that her social economic vulnerability makes her a target for a man around her. And so, by the end of the story, let us explore the message that Goswami gives us through this story. Indira Goswami suggests that love should not be limited by class. Society must value humanity over status, and women deserve dignity and freedom. But also, social customs should never destroy individual happiness. And this is how The Empty Chest is a significant work of feminism and social literature. Because here we explore the level at which women are going through the idea of keeping up with the social obligations and expectations, and to a certain level are blindfolded by the emotional entrapment that they go through in life, which is why this story raises a very important issue, that society is often built on contrary aspects such as love versus society, where true love always has to go through rigid norms if it doesn't meet the requirements that the society has laid down for two people to come together. And the idea of class difference also bridges many difficulties for people around. There is this idea of patriarchy, which stands out as the strong lead, where the individuals who performed this task of control were not even required in the short story as characters, because their presence could be felt in the level of agony the main character experienced. And lastly, the sacrifice that women are going through in a society where their rights are not delivered to them. So, through this entire story, we definitely realize that The Empty Chest, being a short story, is able to explore the conflict between love and social convention, exposing the effects of class discrimination. It is criticizing patriarchal values and highlighting the quiet sacrifice expected of women. Rather than portraying a single unhappy love story, Indira Goswami presents a powerful criticism of society where tradition, status, and family honor are valued more than individual freedom and happiness. So, Thoradoi's empty chest ultimately symbolizes a life emptied of love, affection, care. And that brings us to the end of this lecture. I hope you've enjoyed the entire analysis of this work, because there were many writers who actually appreciated Indira Goswami for how she has beautifully weaved in so many aspects pertaining to Assamese culture, tradition, and the things that she felt that were very important for the time to express about, because she belongs to the late 20th century, And unlike the writers of the previous generation who were only writing about national identity more, Indira Goswami was now heading to the psychological aspects and the personal grievances that people emotionally felt than just talking about the worldwide aspect of nationality. And this is primarily the reason why I feel there are a lot of things that recurrently emerge in her works. And based on one of the interesting fact that I explored while I was going through her documentaries, I came across this very interesting line that was mainly given by Amrita Preetham, who is again another very interesting Indian writer and a close friend of Indira Goswami, who actually said something very interesting about her life, in fact, which was the astrological prediction that was given, where the Pandit had actually told that her stars are not really good. And when this prediction was made, the Pandit had asked to follow this process of a sacrifice of a goat, and that blood stain itself, I think, was a very resonant image that probably came across through the empty chest as well. But I think what Amrita Preetham said to that was that perhaps he had seen only one part of the chart. The other half was hidden with her literary talent. She definitely says in one of her interviews that she would want, if ever somebody writes an epitaph for her, she would want the line that here lies the humanist. And indeed, she was definitely a humanist who saw things, felt things, and was not really trying to just go by one norm by which people were talking about only one perspective. She delved into diverse perspectives, but mainly for those people who were voiceless. She was an animal activist, and she did so much more than just being a mere person who just dwelt on the traditional way in which things were being practiced, and she did not ignore the wrong that was being done. In spite of the fact that she came from a well-to-do Brahmin family, she learnt all these aspects, she felt all these things, and she interacted with people who were not being treated well by the society, which is what makes her reading very interesting. And she definitely did a beautiful research also on our epics, and she wanted to understand so much about it, which is what made her more sensitive and understand about what is it about society that we need to look at, and how even the traditional texts were undergoing a level of change in them. She also said this in one of her interviews, that suffering is inevitable for a writer to evolve and emerge as a good writer, because only when you experience suffering are you able to sensitize yourself more towards the character's pain. And when she looks at a character, she's not just looking at the character for itself, but she is trying to delve into the pain. She is experiencing the pain and forgetting her own, which is why even in a short story we were able to see this idea so beautifully across. And I think this is what is important for us to understand about the level of interest that we gain from this work. So I hope you enjoyed it. Do give it a like if you feel it was helpful in any way for you. Share it with a person who you feel can also benefit. And do subscribe to the channel and be part of the family, because here we discuss, understand literary texts. And do join the family so that you can learn more and more about literature as we keep moving ahead. And this is me, Karishma. Until we meet next time, take care.